So good afternoon. My name is Luis Carrizo, and I believe that we all are in this audience, including myself, an engineer in the full definition of the word. Now, to answer your puzzled faces around here, yes, I am quite the nerd myself, thank you. And no, I'm totally not saying this for you all to feel pity about yourself and be focused in my presentation. But bad jokes aside, I truly feel that engineering truly provides a defining tool through which processes can be optimized and maximized, and you're able to get an easier product that is easily digestible. And this can be applied to many professions throughout the world. And it can be applied to also many events that you might have, such as choosing an outfit in the morning, moving into more complex processes, such as creating pharmaceutics in an industrial complex, and something very, very simple I did for my mathematical internal assessment, which is modeling quaternary bridges using hyperbolic equations in order to compare them to quadratic equations, find out their physics and their kind of physical features, including the gravitational potential energy, to find out their durability. It was complete hell. And to be completely honest with you, as a side note, please IB, do not copyright me for showing you guys all my work. And to be completely honest with you, I did not learn anything from it, which was the worst part. But one thing, and that one thing was that if you're able to organize this plethora of senseless numbers into something that makes kind of a bit of sense, you're already halfway there to passing an assessment that is so dreadful in the area of mathematics in the IB. Therefore, you're able to pass this horrible program that we have in this school. So, from this, you're able to see that engineering kind of applies to way more than just sitting in a boring lecture and the institutionalized way of thinking that you might have in a classroom in university. It goes way beyond that, and it's actually way more interesting. So, to add more of a cultural side to it, as many of you might know, I've been moving around the world for around 7 to 8 years now, with the first one of them all and the first move of them all being the hardest, which is moving from Venezuela to Russia. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys, the whole 24-hour journey, I was scared to life. I mean, the chance of the tundra-like conditions that I was going to meet there, even the chance of seeing a polar bear, that kind of scared me, and even the fact that the temperature there was not even near where my freezer could go to in Venezuela. So to a naive Venezuelan kid, it was kind of different and interesting in sort of way. However, the most interesting part of this whole trip was my dad's attitude. And he was truly the rock that the family needed throughout this whole time. And he was at zen with himself, and he did not even shed a tear when he left Venezuela. And it took me about, I don't know when this TEDx started, 2 months ago to actually find out that it was his engineering approach that he learned in university that allowed him to stay as the rock that we needed throughout this time. This boring flowchart approach that he was able to have, and this boring flowchart approach that he was able to acquire through his knowledge, was able to make his flowchart, ironically, look from something like this to something like this. Assessing risks, assessing benefits, and making your family survive in an uncomfortable situation in a different country where even their own alphabet looks like hieroglyphics. And I want to expand this idea on into a more cultural side that engineering might have in itself. So many of you might know that I am from Venezuela, and in the 80s and 90s, we were considered one of the most producing powerhouses in the whole entire Latin America. We were a model economy to follow for everybody, producing millions upon millions of barrels of oil every single day, selling them at high profits, and having engineering factories in every single university of the country. We were living in a wonderland. However, due to the current situation, now we feel a void inside of us that we don't have this cultural attachment to engineering or any profession at all. Hence, a lot of us are leaving the country. Millions upon millions are immigrating from the country, and actually we're losing our sense of pride, also because that we don't have a profession that we can identify ourselves to. And you can see from this that engineering is something that you can attach to something more cultural and more emotional, rather than just a boring lecture that you might have about thermodynamics. I promise I will mention thermodynamics again to the engineers. But yeah, and additionally to this, I mean, my family is fully consisting of engineers. My mom is an electrical engineer. My dad is an industrial engineer. I'm planning to be a chemical engineer. My cousin Julio Jose is a mechanical engineer. Julio Paul is a computer engineer. Silvia is a mechanical engineer. Sofia is an industrial engineer. My sister is dabbling around the idea of being an engineer, but I don't really trust her. So I don't want to bore you guys, but you pretty much get the idea. Everybody who's not an engineer in my family is pretty much irrelevant. Never mind, just jokes. It's actually the fact that engineering goes beyond kind of this boring lecture approach that I've been mentioning. It's actually more familiar, and you actually might be able to have an attachment to it that goes far beyond the boring books that you have to read throughout this. Another aspect of engineering that is pretty interesting in itself is the fact that it can be applied to so many things. So if many of you travel to Japan, you might have seen the Shinkansen train. The Shinkansen bullet train is one of the fastest trains in the world, and there was a problem with it. In the 80s and 90s, it was passing the 70 decibel limit while passing through tunnels. What does this mean? Many people were getting complaints about the noise that the train made by passing through there, and actually it was getting pretty tedious for them to deal with it, until they employed a concept called biomimicry. Biomimicry, in boring engineering terms that they might tell you in third year of university, is the emulation of natural processes and the optimization of processes using natural features. In more simple and Christian terms, you're able to see that biomimicry is just looking at nature and actually just applying it to simplify a process. So this whole idea of biomimicry came in when they employed Eiji Nakatsu. Now, Eiji Nakatsu was a former bird watcher who was able to model the train, the Shinkansen bullet train, after many animals. For example, you're able to have kingfishers who are able to, find out that these kingfishers are able to model the beak and the point of the train in itself in order for it to be more efficient. And you're also able to have an owl's wings to model a pantograph in order to make it glide through the air easily, and also a penguin's belly. Therefore, you're able to see that a birdwatcher was able to act as an engineer in order for him to simplify a process that would have affected millions upon millions of people in Japan every single year. Therefore, making people who are not even graduate engineers as engineers, like yourselves. Additionally, if I was to mention the brand Louis Vuitton, many of you might lose it. I mean, it's probably your favorite brand. Some of you might probably enjoy it, depending on your luxury taste. And if I was to tell you also that the head of the men's design wear in Louis Vuitton since 2018, if I was to tell you that he was a civil engineer, you would not believe me. Let me introduce you to Virgil Abloh. Virgil Abloh graduated as a civil engineer from the University of Illinois and went on to further study architecture at the University of Wisconsin. What does this mean? He was able to incorporate much of his work as an engineer and as an architect in order to build his craft and climb up the hierarchy, even getting an internship in Fendi as a designer alongside Kanye West. And throughout this climb of his hierarchy, he was able to actually make a lot of things for himself. Like, for example, his own Apple Music radio show. He was able to make televised radio. He was able to work alongside Kanye West. He was able to make the covers for Watch the Throne and design the covers for my favorite Yeezus album. I know you guys are going to hate me. My favorite Kanye West album, Yeezus. He was also able to sell an IKEA mirror for $50 that now resells for like $1,000. And he was able to incorporate much of his work into the structure of his pieces and actually add certain beauty to it, which is the beauty of engineering in itself. It's not a boring lecture that you might have building off from past points that I've mentioned, but rather it's a beauty of a structure that you might add to any piece of work in order to simplify it and actually add an aesthetic piece that might make it interesting. And additionally to this, you can see much of his engineering approach throughout many of his works that he has done. For example, his 2-story high sculpture of a model wearing his own Wizard of Oz inspired Louis Vuitton runway look in 2018. This is in New York City. And he was able to make this using his architect background. He was also able to completely destroy the Air Jordan 1, the favorite shoe of everybody's favorite shoe that plays basketball. A shoe that meant so much and was banned throughout the NBA forever. And it was, if you were to scuff them, you were to be shunned upon inside of that community. However, he was able to cut them apart and use this kind of structure in order to make ugly things, like the numbers in my mathematical AA, look like something more interesting. It looked like something more structured. Therefore, applying an engineering approach to what was considered fashion, which was mainly considered aesthetic, and now making it more structured. As a whole, however, you're able to see that now the world is changing. No longer engineers, that weird group of people in the side of a library that read books and you shouldn't talk to. That's a lie, sorry. Yes, do not talk to engineers just yet. But it actually grows far beyond that. Now you're able to see a bird watcher work as a trained designer, as a trained engineer, and as an aerodynamic engineer, well, you're also able to have a civil engineer lead one of the highest grossing luxury houses in the world. So I invite you all to look around us. Let us look like Agent Akatsu around our surroundings and apply it to simplify processes. Let us be like Virgil Abloh and apply structural features in order to make our work simpler and look more beautiful. Let us find the less boring engineer in us. Thank you.